All right, what's going on, everybody? We are on a random tip tonight. This is a random show. Just because I'm annoyed with looking at this FBA ignorance. As always, if you show up, you show up. If you don't, I've still got hours to get in. All right, so take a second, check out the groove, and we'll get into this in just a moment. All right, what's going on, peeps? Currently, there's no one here, but I'm all right with that. Reason being, as I always say, the show is not about how many people that we can get in when I telecast or televise, but how many people see the message later on. So as I always and continue to say here, I've got hours that I need to get in. So whether anyone shows up or not, it's about at least making sure that the message is available to be seen and heard. And the message today, take a look. It's a random show. FBA, Oversimplified Rhetoric and Deception. Now, more and more, no matter when I turn either my computer on or open up my phone, there's some type of ignorance I'm seeing displayed centered around FBA's belief of being a blueprint of something of sorts. Black excellence is what they continually try to claim that they represent. But the problem here is that in order to represent excellence, you have to be acknowledged first as being a movement striving towards it. But we don't see this from FBA. Instead, what we continually see is this apathetic, aggressive, and generally ignorant showing or lack of competence that we see displayed by FBA aimed directly at blacks. Yes, and I say blacks. I'm being real specific about this. When I say aimed at blacks, I'm talking about this anti-black diaspora divisive rhetoric being aimed at the same folks who are descended from the same continent, although we're spread out around the world, gatekeeping and intentionally trying to make them seem to be the enemy. I've said this numerous times, and I'll continue to keep saying this. It doesn't matter where the slave ships dropped us off. What we need to be concerned about is where the slave ships took us from. And that is some type of reason that FBA just fails to comprehend. And we can see this anytime you have someone make a comment, well, my people did not come from Africa. My people originated in South America. And then from there, I've got my lineage with these people. And then also, well, wait a minute. If you're FBA, you can't claim South American lineage, or as you try to do, being indigenous, trying to claim indigenous heritage. Because remember, FBA does not care for anyone who is not black and born in the United States. So you're canceling yourself out right there. Right? That's a contradiction right from the get-go. But there's never any thought given when you hear this type of nonsense. Anyway, like I said, I'm on one tonight, and I'm not looking for a lot of participation for anyone, being that it's almost 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I didn't really announce this, but as I said before, It's all about making sure the information is there. All right, enough from me. Let's go ahead and get this on here. I got shit I need to do. All right, so I don't have any information or that has any music required at the time. So we'll go ahead and just do a whole screen share. Also, take note, folks. I've got scrolling down here a Cash App. So if there's any bit of change anyone wants to put towards the show, hey, greatly appreciate it. If not, that's okay. The takeaway from this is the information. But if you can give back with a little bit of change, I'm cool with that too. So let's go ahead and get this on and started. So you continue to see FBA talk about, oh, I've got nothing to do with Africa. I'm a proud Black American. My lineage goes back to slavery. I can trace my lineage right here in America. But what they seem to always fail to think is that once you trace your lineage to this supposed Black American who was a slave, you're leaving something out, that this individual, himself or herself, they have a lineage as well that goes back to enslaved Africans. But FBA never wants to look at that. They always have this sectional approach. Well, just stop right here. I can trace my lineage back to slavery. But as soon as they trace it back to an individual, they believe that's it. My history starts here. And that is not the case. But then when you bring it up to them, so how do you think you got here? Then you have this next bit of nonsense. Oh, well, we've always been here. We are indigenous to the land. So that's the approach they take to cut out their African ancestry by claiming that we've always been here, which we have not. All right, I'll get into this a little bit later here, but still, claiming that we have always been here is a misassertion. Again, if you recall Dr. Ivan Van Sertima's book, we were here before Columbus, or excuse me, they came before Columbus. What some FBA proponents like to do is make the statement that, oh, well, that book just shows that we've always been here. No, it was a chance occurrence of the Africans coming from the Guinea region, speaking with the natives 200 years before Columbus, being documented as said by the natives they came from the South. This is what was provided to Columbus, or at least the folks who came with Columbus when they were being told of having seen visitors with dark skin. So Black people love to take that and say, oh, that just shows that we were always here. No, it was a visit. It was a stopover. No one stayed, although there was trade with almond heads and such. No one stayed. Matter of fact, and I've said this numerous times, I will continue to say this. Yes, Africans did make it to North America as we know it before the English settlers got here. But that's because we were brought here as slaves from the Spanish colonies in the Caribbean. That is why there were Blacks here before the Europeans, or should I say before the English. Now, of course, in Florida, prior to the English getting here, you had Spanish colonies. There were Spanish colonies in the US, but ideally, Africans who spoke Spanish, who were here before the English, were brought here as slaves by the Spaniards. When the colonies failed, the Spaniards went back to their colonies back in not South America, but back in the Caribbean, leaving the Black who had revolted here. So these slaves were left and then migrated out and then pretty much integrated in with the local Indian population. Hence where you have Black Seminoles, Black Indians, so to speak. But make no mistake, we were not here growing societies, growing crops, building foundations to the point that foundational Black Americans like to claim. It was never that type of party. All right, getting down to it. Define African descendant versus Native African. An African descendant is a person of African origin living outside the African continent, primarily part of the African diaspora in the Americas, often due to historical forced displacement like the transatlantic slave trade. A Native African is an individual born, raised, and indigenous to the continent of Africa with unbroken generational lineage there. Do we even need to go any further? Do we have to have this debate here? FBA, if you are watching, you have no lineage, you have no heritage, you have no culture, you have no icons unless you are misappropriating it from African descendants. Come at me if you want to on this. All I've got is facts for you. Let's go a little bit further down before we move on, folks, all right? So when we look at the core differences in definition, African descendant, being the diaspora, refers to lineage tracing back to Africa, but whose contemporary culture, nationality, and generational roots are established in other regions of the world, such as African Americans, Afro-Latinos, or Afro-Caribbeans. These are actual, these are actual designations, put it that way. These are actual designations. Dislike it all you want, but you always will hear FBA say, oh no, that's not real. So FBA always wants to say that you can't try and define us based on what the white man started for us, made their claims on how to define us, but yet FBA will sit here and try and define everybody else who actually has a legitimate designator. Call it hypocritical, because that's exactly what it is. Native African refers to someone who is autochthonous, I probably murdered that, but anyway, or born on the African continent, possessing direct cultural, linguistic, and immediate ancestral ties to a specific African homeland or ethnic group. So we as African descendants have matured and grown outside of that natural incubator, which is Africa, our ancestral homeland. But when you have the conversation with FBA, oh no, we've got nothing to do with Africa. We were always here. We are indigenous to the United States, or indigenous to America, because of the fact when America was founded, slaves just happened to be here breathing air. So they believe because of being here when America was founded, that makes them indigenous. Not that they were here for 120 years, 500 years, or 1,000 years. Just because within maybe 60 to 80 years or so, 100, name it, whatever you want to call it, FBA wants to claim indigeneity. But no, you cannot. Who says you can't? No, not John Henry. No, anthropologists make this known. Scientists who look at genealogy make this known. No, FBA, you are not indigenous to the United States just because you were here when the country was founded. Now, as you can see here, here's a few more areas that you can read through. I'm just going to do a slow scroll just in case you don't want to go back and look it up for yourselves. But as I said, I want to try and get out of here in a decent time frame. If anyone shows up, we have a longer conversation. You know what? So be it. But until then, let's keep on pressing. So here's something else that I put inside of Google as an anchor. Individuals identifying exclusively as foundational Black Americans have never been officially recognized for contributions contributing to African American prominence. And this is a fact. As I said before, I don't understand why you always hear FBA talking in platitudes. Well, look at the things that we've done as Black people. We are magnificent. Look at the excellence. We are the blueprint. Okay, give me something that FBA specifically has done and has been recognized for. But they can't. There's nothing FBA, anyone who is identified as FBA can be identified in history as having accomplished or having accomplished anything unless they misappropriate African American distinction. Booker T. Washington, Thurgood Marshall, W.E. Du Bois. These are blacks who have been recognized. They have given prominence or brought prominence to the capabilities of African Americans. Notice I say African Americans. I'm not trying to be generic by just saying Black Americans. No, anyone who has come from the continent, who is outside of Africa, is an African descendant. So I'll just say we have African descendants from the Caribbean, from South America, from Jamaica. Here in America, we have African descendants that FBA wants to cut out of the picture of even having been recognized for what prominence they brought, such as Marcus Garvey, for example. Once FBA started to look at the aspect of Marcus Garvey not being born in America, of course, they started dissing him. I remember Tariq Nasheed was on one about 6 or 7 months ago, talking mad noise about Marcus Garvey. But yet, when you look back at the history of FBA in the very beginnings, he was one of the folks that they touted. Routinely, they will commandeer African American icons and claim that they are FBA. A couple of shows back, I pointed this out, how some idiot ass, forgive my language, FBA acolyte claimed that Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Harriet Tubman said that they were FBA. And this started on TikTok when I said, show me proof, give me evidence. And of course, they can't do that. The only time they claim to have evidence about icons being FBA is when they misappropriate African Americans with distinction who have already been recognized as being prominent and, let's say being prominent in establishing the foundation of Black excellence in the Americas. FBA has nothing of that to speak of, but they will always attempt to create some type of platform to establish credibility that they have none of unless they steal it. As I said before, FBA is nothing more but culture, vulture behavior. And we can liken that to stolen valor. But enough of me ranting. So getting to the definition, or at least the output that I got back from my inquiry. Individuals identifying as foundational Black Americans represent a specific lineage-based designation rather than a formal legal or civic category. Consequently, while the historical contributions of Black Americans with deep U.S. roots are widely celebrated, the specific nomenclature of FBA is a recent socio-political framework rather than an official status used in institutional recognition. FBA, you're nothing. All right, you're a fleeting moment in between news cycles. And if your name happens to be mentioned, it doesn't mean that you're prominent. It doesn't mean that you're gaining traction. It just means that there wasn't shit else to talk about. So here you go. Has anyone ever seen wet dog shit on the grass? And when you try to clean it up, it just smears. It just gets further entrenched. And you just have to let that shit rot away, just drain into the ground. That's FBA. Don't step it. All right, so understanding the FBA designation. Lineage focus. The term refers to Black Americans who descend from people enslaved and emancipated in the United States. Okay, so I want to claim falsehood right there. Because again, there's no such thing as foundational Black American, as it's said here, that is institutionally recognized. It's just some type of self-proclaimed name that's been thrown out. And then the more they speak it, they think it gives it authority. It gives it presence. No, all you're doing is just giving idiocy. So when we talk about people who have been enslaved and emancipated, we're talking about African Americans, or should I say African American descendants of Africa. These are folks who were enslaved but have been emancipated. Foundation of Black Americans, no, they have no role in this. Why? Because remember, they aren't African. They are not descendant of Africa. Therefore, if you're claiming all this, you've denounced your African heritage. So even adding to that, if you've denounced your African heritage, why in the hell do you think that you are eligible for reparations? Reparations is only for those persons who are descended from African American slavery. There's nothing here for you, FBA. You kicked yourselves right out of the reparations conversation as soon as you said, oh, well, we have nothing to do with Africa. We're not descendants of anyone outside of America. We are always here, which again is categorically false. Distinction from immigration. Advocates use it to separate native-born descendants of U.S. chattel slavery from first-generation or recent Black immigrants. Again, I said I've got something for this. Anytime. Core goals. Promoters often focus the designation on calls for specific policy actions, such as reparations for American slavery. Now, this thing that just chafes my draws, all right? Or as Tony, what's his name, says, chafes my draws. The problem here is that you never hear anything about FBA talking about uplifting the race in and of itself. Again, that's the Black race. The only thing that they are concerned about is getting money for reparations. And again, these are reparations that they themselves are not entitled to. Why? Because they claim that they are not African descendants. They have nothing to do with Africa. The whole purpose of reparations is to provide restitution for those descendants of African slavery. African descendants. FBA, that's not you. You blew your whole argument around reparations by claiming that you are not African descendant or you have no heritage or any ties with Africa. See, that's the problem with not having a true lineage, because in order to have a lineage, you have to have a direct and continuous connection to an origin. At the moment you guys said that you weren't African, you completely denounced your origin story. There's nothing for you. And that's not me making anything up. This is based upon the conversation of lineage, your lack of any ancestry, because again, you don't have it. You denounced it. Think that over. Recognition of contributions, broad recognition. Oh, wait, I missed one. Let me go back. Core goals. Promoters often focus the designation on calls for specific policy actions such as reparations for American slavery. Did I read that? Well, if not, it's still pretty much the same thing. There are no reparations for FBA. Again, broad recognition. Mainstream history, cultural awards, and civic honors recognize Black Americans collectively for foundational roles in civil rights, literature, music, and the overall building of the United States. I'll read this again. Mainstream history, cultural awards, and civic honors recognize Black Americans collectively for foundational roles in civil rights. Notice they didn't say foundational Black Americans roles in civil rights. It said for foundational roles in civil rights, literature, music, and the overall building of the United States. So FBA is trying to shoehorn and cut themselves out, or should I say cut everyone else away from significant achievements by claiming it in and of themselves that they are the ones responsible. There I even says they like to call themselves the blueprint, which they are not. FBA is the blueprint for ignorance and deception and just outright foolery. As I just said, they tried to cut everyone else out of prominence by claiming we are responsible for this, but yet there's no one who is identified as FBA ever who has received any accolades or had anything bestowed upon them for providing accomplishment and aiding prominence of the Black experience in America. Get them out of here. Absence of formal classification. Governments and official historical bodies do not use foundational Black American as an official demographic or civic category for bestowing honors. preferring terms like African American or Black American. FBA, you're nothing. You are nothing officially recognized except maybe being word of mouth on the internet. Miss me with this nonsense. So right about now, let me play something for you folks. But to do that, let me stop the music here, sir. So I don't have anyone here to tell me whether or not if you can hear it. So we're just gonna have to play this by ear. Fair use. So I can't be any clearer than what I've just stated. It's nothing more than gamesmanship, semantics, whatever you want to call it, when you see FBA going about on the internet talking about, oh, well, this person is foundational. We are foundational to the building of America. No, you are not. Anything that our ancestors did was foundational. But for you to take the word foundational, create a group that is steeped around anti-Black rhetoric that is similar to far-right extremism and claim that you are foundational is a lie. Anything that anything that our Black ancestors did, or our African American ancestors did, was foundational. It was setting the goal, the benchmark. They were building the foundation. So yes, you can say that their actions helped to found the American country as we know it. They were foundational in that aspect. They were founding in that aspect. But to claim that they are foundational Black Americans simply because of a title you took for yourselves, knowing that it was gamesmanship and anything that Blacks did would be seen as foundational, that is nothing more than deception. And it's fraudulent on top of that. So if it has not been made known to folks, I will make it known. I will continue to say these things so it does get ingrained in your psyche. FBA has no history. They have no icons. They have no lineage. They have no culture unless they steal it. To which now they have nothing but their chest out talking about, well, look at the things we've done. They have a lot of platitudinal conversation, but they have nothing of substance to back it up. I mean, I just want you also to have a moment to just look at my chat here, just ignorance. And luckily enough, I had people who recognized the lies. If Malcolm X was alive, FBA would have rejected this philosophy. Well, the thing here is that if Malcolm X had lived, or even, he doesn't even have to live, because we all know that Malcolm X was a Pan-Africanist. But yet FBA still tries to claim him. But when they do try to claim Malcolm X, they don't ever try and claim post-Mecca Malcolm X. They like to claim pre-Mecca Malcolm X. The Malcolm X heads who was filled with nothing but the lies, the bigotry, and the rhetoric of the Nation of Islam. That type of nonsense. Hey, what's going on, Ty? Hey, man, I wasn't planning on doing anything. I promise you, man. It was nothing was going to happen. But I happened to catch Chris on TikTok doing a show. And you had someone up there just completely wilding out, talking about, oh, man, FBA, we're wondrous. We've done many things for the country. Why is everyone trying to define who we are? Just a lot of nonsense. So again, I apologize, man. This one is 100% random. Everything else I did was actually planned out. But still, I'm glad you showed up. So if you caught the video, folks, or even if you're watching this in the replay, understand here that you will have individuals who will still try and say Malcolm X is FBA, Thurgood Marshall, or W. Du Bois, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King Jr. They will always try and say that these individuals are foundational Black Americans, not because they actually are, but because of the fact they were foundational in establishing prominence for Blacks in America. For anybody who's missed that, go back and check out this video on TikTok. Here's the URL if you want to get caught up. So as I said before, there's a lot of wordsmithing that you have here with the FBA folks. I catch when I can. I just got here, so I'll get in where I fit in. All right, appreciate it. So there are a lot of folks with people, a lot of folks out here, people that do not subscribe and believe this FBA nonsense. But the thing is, you don't see enough of them because there are not enough people like myself. Not saying that I'm any better than anybody else, but I'm saying that you don't have enough people who are pushing back and making sure that they're seen. A lot of conversation that I see that goes against the FBA is generally on TikTok. Now, I'll go to TikTok from time to time for anyone who follows me over there. You know that I release shorts like this, but I always link my shorts that I either do here on YouTube or over on TikTok back to a YouTube full form video. So that's just how I work. I will have shorts that are sometimes stand on their own. I'll link shorts to each other, but eventually one of those shorts is going to link to a long form video in order to make sure that a full show gives more context to the little bit that I provide inside of these shorts. But even for these shorts to be seen and read, you've got to see some of the nonsense and the foolery that comes from this. Let me see, agenda, pipeline. So here we go. So this dude came up here and said that Malcolm X was aboriginal to the Americas. Well, actually, Malcolm X was saying that we are aboriginal to the planet. But this individual had the nerve to try and say that Malcolm X was saying that he was indigenous to America, which was not the case. We got time. I talked to this FBA guy the other day, and he reminded me that black is in their name. And if anybody is claiming FBA and said they're not black, is faking. Well, the whole thing is not about being black. It's about acknowledging your African American heritage and ancestry. That's the main thing. Everyone will say, oh, well, I'm black. That's not a problem for FBA to say that they're black. But what they will not say is that they are African descendant, because that goes against the narrative that they've created for themselves. So I can't imagine someone being FBA saying that I'm not a black American. That just doesn't make any sense. And that already goes against the ignorance that they're perpetuating to begin with, saying that I'm not black, but I'm a foundational. What are you, a foundational American now? But yeah, this FBA is always going to be rife with contradictions. So again, I appreciate that time. Let me see if this will come up. Malcolm X speech on Instagram exposing everything. He said he was Aborigine. And as I said before, an Aborigine of the planet, not an Aborigine altogether. But you never get the proper context when you look at these folks talking this craziness. Matter of fact, let me bring something else. This is going to go back to the show that I was talking about. Here we go. So a shout out to the brother Christopher Paul Marriott. So this is the show that I happened to come across on TikTok today, where he invited some folks up from FBA, and these guys talked all types of crazy stuff. I'm talking absolute foolishness. But what I always find to be amazing is when FBA miscontextualizes facts. For example, oldest DNA found in a black man from South Carolina. So for whatever reason, this clown right here, DLJ1209, because of the fact that a black man's body was found to have a Y chromosome that stretched back to almost 300,000 years to a particular group of people, he tried to make it seem as if this man was indigenous and prehistoric, found in America. No, he was a modern individual whose DNA showed that he had a commonality with a particular group stretching back 300,000 years. But I'll show that in just a moment. But this is that, well, heck, it says it right here, addressing questionable FBA claims. And if I hadn't stopped to take a look at this and bring this to your attention, many of you would have been in some conversation someplace with FBA listening to someone saying, oh, there was this black man named Albert Finney that was found in South Carolina, and he proves that we were indigenous to the land. No, we were not indigenous to the land. Again, his body just happened to be in South Carolina in the United States, but he was not a prehistoric find. His DNA just happened to be associated with people with a particular gene going back 300,000 years. That's it. FBA and facts, or the lack thereof. But let's stay with this one for a second. All right, so moving that to the side, what else can I add to that moment of ignorance? Where are we? Nope, that's not it. Here we go. So I don't know if you can see this. I hope you can. So as I said, did I say Albert Finney? I'm sorry, I meant to say Albert Perry. Let me just read it to you. So this is what I typed in. The discovery of Albert Perry does not make him indigenous to North America. It just means his Y chromosome is associated with the oldest people in history. And that's generally how FBA clowns up. They have poor comprehension. Because this man's Y chromosome was associated with, as I said, the oldest people in history, he took it to mean that, oh, this guy was found in the United States. That means that we've always been here. No, he was a modern, uh, a modern American, put it that way, someone who was born in recent times who just happened to be unique based upon this Y chromosome. So here's what the inquiry gave back. It says, you are correct. The genetic findings regarding Albert Perry have nothing to do with being indigenous to North America. Perry was an African-American man born in South Carolina, and his DNA revealed haplogroup A00, the oldest known branching lineage of the human Y chromosome. Notice it said nothing about him being indigenous to North America. Nothing along those lines. It just said that he had chromosomes associated with the oldest known lineage. That's it. But if you lack the proper comprehension, you know, I can't even make an excuse. I don't see how the hell that guy got to this. FBA just does this type of nonsense. But anywho, feel free if you want to. I'll leave it here for a second before we move on to any more here. Nope, that's pretty much it. But feel free to take this information for use, type it into Google or whatever search engine you have, and see what you come back with. But understand here, Albert Perry was not found, or should I say his body was not found under multiple layers of earth that would determine if it was the Neolithic period, the Paleolithic period. No, it was nothing of that. His body just happened to be I guess tested, or whatever you do when you go through an autopsy, and they happen to find something unique about him. Nothing more. Boy, FBA, sometimes y'all just come up with some dumb stuff. Was caught in the FBA stream where the panel claimed they weren't Black, just indigenous Aborigines. Unsubscribe fast. I don't rock with fake history. Hey, I appreciate that, man. We need to make sure that anytime we see any type of panel that is giving credence to disinformation, hey, put it off, cut it off. But also in the future time, if you happen to catch my shows, bring that information to me so I can make it known to everybody else if you're not already doing so. We need to make sure everybody knows where this false history is being taught by foundational Black Americans. All right, this foolery needs to be stopped. And I want to look at myself as being one of the stands and one of the places that are factual that you can come to. As I said before, I am unapologetically Black with facts. I'm standing on it. So going through, did I have anything else? Yes. Where are we? So we have the tactics that I spoke of that the FBA likes to use. So I typed this in at another point in time, but I figured this was a good time to share. FBA anti-Black rhetoric mirrors exclusionary political tactics by treating other Black populations as outside competitors for limited resources. FBA and anti-Black rhetoric FBA anti-Black rhetoric mirrors exclusionary political tactics through resource competition, nationalist separation, and cultural gatekeeping. So look at resource competition and exclusion. Scarcity mindset frames new Black immigrants and non-FBA groups as direct threats to jobs, housing, and government aid. Zero-sum framing asserts that support for other Black communities directly harms Native Black Americans. Oh, and follow-up. If I do that, Big John, I'll send you the link and timestamp so you can go to the part I'm talking about and judge for yourself. Appreciate it. Do what you do. Boundary policing uses strict lineage definitions to block others from claiming shared socioeconomic grievances. Uh, Political tactics and rhetoric. I'm looking over here at my other screen because the font is large. See, I wear glasses. Nativist separation mirrors mainstream nationalist movements by declaring an authentic local group versus outside interlopers. Grievance redirection shifts systemic economic blame away from broader structures and onto competing marginalized populations. And finally, identity essentialism insists that historical suffering grants exclusive rights to modern political and economic remedies. Bull. Again, these are FBA exclusionary tactics. Make no mistake, these folks are doing nothing to aid Black unity, but more or less undermining it using the same type of rhetoric and approach that their slave master taught them. Do I have anything else to add to that? Here we go. Nope, we already talked about Albert Perry. Oh, fake lineage. So yet again, here's something else that I went after. Define the negative connotation of gamesmanship within the context of determining a fabricated group's non-existent lineage. I have no idea how that question mark got there. I must not have been paying attention. Anywho, what came back from Google? The negative connotation of gamesmanship in this context reflects a win-at-all-costs mindset. It uses technical loopholes, deceit, and manipulation to fabricate historical legitimacy. And this is what I've been saying the entire time, whether you've seen it in another show or you listen to any of my shorts. FBA has no history. They have no legacy. They have no icon. They have no culture. They have nothing unless they steal it from African Americans with distinctions, thereby self-tethering themselves to the backs of African American prominence and attempting to claim it as their own. I don't believe in any type of God or anything like that, but I will say, not today, Satan. Anywho, moving on. Ethical subversion. Exploiting loopholes, bending historical record keeping, or ambiguous data norms without technically committing outright fraud. So what you have here is them tap dancing on that line. Again, as I pointed out, foundational Black Americans. Oh, so-and-so is foundational. So therefore, that makes him a foundational Black American. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Exploiting a loophole by using foundational, or should I say misusing the word foundational. But we'll get more into that in a moment. I think I have a definition up here for that as well. Manufacturing authority. Using deceptive framing to trick observers into granting unearned social, cultural, or institutional privilege. I just talked about that. FBA has done nothing to garner any type of credibility that they are talking themselves into by speaking through platitudes, claiming Black excellence while never pointing out one single specific instance of anyone identifying as FBA ever having had any honor bestowed upon them because FBA provided something good for the culture. Nothing. Be active. What's going on, man? I tried to shoot you an email earlier, but when I went to your page, I didn't have an email address or anything. So I apologize about that. Don't mind you being late to the stream. Time just got here a few minutes ago himself. But still, thanks for showing up, man. And again, as I said before, shoot me an email, something like that, so I can let you guys know ahead of time. Let me do this one more again. So put my email address down here. All right, so anybody, whether if you're in the replay gang or anyone watching from the clouds, you got anything you want to say to me? There it is. Hit me up. Salute. Let me do it properly. So as I said here, exploiting loopholes, manufacturing authority. This is a big one. All right, this is what we see FBA going through right now, or continually going through, trying to make sure that everyone sees them as an authority figure, which they are not. There has been nothing of prominence. All right, cool out. There has been nothing of prominence that FBA has ever been associated with. I mean, at least ADOS may get out here and throw a barbecue or something like that. All right, cool. So what? Even though they may do all this to bring attention to the organization, there is nothing of prominence has ever been contributed to the African American culture, to our African American heritage by either ADOS or FBA, because neither one of them gives any credence to their African heritage. ADOS, African descendants, or excuse me, American descendants of slavery. Why wouldn't it be AADOS, African American descendants of slavery? They could have done that, but they chose not to because, again, of this distinct and fabricated concept of carving out reparations just for blacks who can trace their lineage to slavery here in America. Whereas we in America, or let me take that back, America was last in receiving slaves on the continent. So therefore, if you were the last to receive slaves or to have slaves brought to the country, why are you trying to be the first one to stand in line claiming that reparations is yours? As I said before, because of the fact that FBA has pretty much laid waste and renounced their African heritage, well, we have nothing to do with slavery. We were always here. We're indigenous to the land. Then that means that you have no claim to reparations. Idiots. Lastly, bad faith, treating truth as a mere competitive sport rather than an objective reality. Put a 1 in the chat if you agree with everything that I've just read regarding this nonsensical gamesmanship that FBA plays. It is nothing but gamesmanship, wordsmithing, rhetoric, all right, semantics that FBA operates off of. They are neither authorities of anything having to do with the Black experience, or should I say the African American experience in America. They don't own this, they don't get to define it, but a lot of people have allowed them to do so, thereby causing FBA to believe that they are an authority figure in which they are not. I appreciate it. Hey, facts don't choose sides. People do. I'm not sure if time has gotten off somewhere, but if so, I can understand it because it is getting a little bit late over here. But let's keep on pressing, folks. All right, so this goes back right now, this particular piece here. I talked about how FDA is deceptive. Oh, there you go, Tom. I thought you bounced for a second. I want to agree from what I've seen, but I'm afraid I don't know enough. I just don't like what I see. All right, you not liking what you see, that's the first part in knowing that something is wrong with what you are hearing. If you don't know enough, keep doing what you're doing. Show up, and I'll make sure that I provide information that gives you the understanding that you're lacking. Or if I can't do it here, I'll point you to some folks who can. But as I mentioned before, there's a lot of information that you can get on your own when you're not showing up for any of my shows that you can find right here on YouTube. Let's see. Dr. John Henry Clark. Dr. His name is spelled many different ways. We'll say Yosef Ben Yakin. We'll go with this. I've been talking to people who are claiming the FBA to. Yes, have the conversation with them. Listen to this maniacal, what do they call it? This menticide. I mean, mental destruction. Have the conversation with them. Listen to them. Get an idea of this nonsense that you're hearing. And I'm going to call it what it is, nonsense, because anyone who claims that blacks did not leave on ships from Africa is out of their damn fool ass minds. Pardon the language, folks. You know we don't get down like this, but when I start talking about FBA, it just annoys the shizzle out of me for this type of black incompetence to exist when we have, again, master teachers who've gone on to become ancestors like Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Chancellor Williams, Dr. John G. Jackson, Dr. Joseph Benyakin, just to name a few, Sheikh Anta Diop. These are folks who have taken the time to uncover the lies that have been hidden about our history. We've had the Greeks for far too long take credit for the accomplishments of history, of medicine, of math. People not realizing that these folks who got the credit for this came to Africa for the knowledge that they're known by. I've done a show on that before, but maybe I need to go back and bring this information back forward. But anyway, a couple of names that I want you guys to look up when you get a chance. Dr. Joseph Benyakin, also known as Dr. Joseph Benyakin. Dr. John Henry Clark. And, who else did I say? Dr. John G. Jackson. I hope I spell his name right. Yeah, if I've got that wrong, I'll get it right the next time around. And from Beat Active, which really doesn't make any logical sense because FBA makes it seem like if the government decided to pay millions or billions in reparations, there's more. The government definitely will not rely on a term. The government will definitely use DNA tests and genealogy paper, not by no term like FBA. That's how uneducated FBA are. If they really think that, yeah. They think that by calling themselves something, or as we've seen by Donald Trump and his cronies, if they keep saying it enough, it's going to bring it into existence. But if you go back a couple of minutes here, maybe if I get some time, I'll jump back in the slides here. I stated here that it is not, it being FBA is not a recognized designation. It is nothing more than wet dog shit in grass. It's nothing. All right, so FBA deceptively misuses the word foundational to create false lineage and fraudulent history for the unearned recognition of being seen as an authority of Black history in America. We just covered this, folks, did we not? About loopholes and about bad faith, claiming to be an authority. We just literally looked at that. But that's what I typed into Google. Here's the response that I got back. The term foundational Black American, popularized around 2020 as a spinoff from the ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, movement, is used by its proponents to designate Black Americans who trace their lineage directly to people enslaved and emancipated in the United States, while advocates present it as a valid genealogical distinction for pursuing targeted policies like reparations, which it is not. Critics argue that the terminology and its usage create ideological gatekeeping and historical distortion. Yes, it is. John, do you know that FBA and Indigenous are links in your description? One to FBA stuff and the other to Indigenous. I was going through the FBA stuff. I plan to check some of it out later. Yes, I put that inside of the tags. So if people want to look up information that I'm providing. If they type in indigenous, that means that hopefully my stream pops up. So what I'm doing is using some of the words that FBA generally like to throw out here in order to claim certain status, which they're not. Um, I want to say that on the last live I did, maybe 1 or 2 lives ago, I had Cassandra Cole, I think that was her last name, who came up and gave us some information about people not realizing you can go to jail for impersonating Native Americans. You can go to jail if you attempt to create items and say that they are of Native American ancestry. You're getting locked up. Oh no, man! It's a tactic that everybody uses. That's why they talk about making sure that you tag your videos properly. Hopefully, it brings folks around to look at this in the replay. But Sandra came up here and made it clear that if you violate there's an act that she gave out here, a couple of them actually, but if you are guilty of violating that, you can get jail time and fined for this. The tag helps the algorithm and promote it. Yes, be that. Thanks for that, man. That's more specific what it does, Ty. It helps for me, hopefully, to get caught up inside the algorithm. And there's been a couple of times where I've shown up on the main page if you open up YouTube first thing in the morning. So every now and then that occurs, but I want to try and make sure that enough folks see this. And if we don't get a lot of folks in the show, hopefully the replay brings a lot of views in. But that comes back to me, as I said before, making sure that when I drop any type of teasers or these little shorts, I link them back to the full-length show that provides additional context. So that's what we're trying to do, man. We're trying to get more folks in here aware of these lies that the FBA is telling. Excuse me. So, good and on with this. Arguments and criticisms regarding the FBA label. Lineage versus heritage. Critics contend that the label attempts to sever modern Black American identity from its broader African and diasporic roots, substituting a localized ethnic nationalist framework that some scholars argue relies on surface level historical narrative. Yes, it does. You've got this made up nonsense where these guys are literally, and I say these guys, meaning FBA, attempting to take this divisive rhetoric and pin drop it into the middle of our acknowledged and recorded African American history to create some type of narrative that provides credibility by claiming, oh, these folks were FBA. No, they were not. FBA is a modern term. FBA is a moniker for nonsense. FBA never existed until 2019, 2020. So therefore, you cannot go back in history and make claims without anything substantiating them, stating that W.E. Du Bois or Harriet Tubman were foundational Black Americans. That is a damn lie. Woo! Exclusionary boundaries. Commenters and community members note that the designation actively draws a rigid line between descendants of U.S. chattel slavery and subsequent Black immigrants from Africa or the Caribbean, which critics view as a form of othering or nativism that undermines Pan-African solidarity. So there's a whole lot more to go through with this, but I'm just going to go ahead and skate through and just make sure that it's at least on the screen. So if you're watching the video later, if you want to stop it, you can read what's here. All right, still moving. So I have a lot of things in my mind that I've typed in here, folks. Let's keep on rolling. Justifying the online socio-political group justifying the online socio-political group Foundational Black Americans attempt to control the narrative of Black history feeds distorted history, revisionism, and anti-Black rhetoric similar to far-right extremism by a false guise of resource and lineage preservation. I had a lot on my mind when I put that one down, but check out what I got back. And this is more a direct and immediate answer, which is what I like, depending on how you frame your statements to Google. Direct and immediate answer. Critiques of the foundational Black American movement argue that its strict lineage boundaries and gatekeeping echo nationalist rhetoric. Critics contend this framing can promote historical distortion, exclude diverse Black experiences, and foster divisive rhetoric under the banner of heritage and resource protection. Boom. Do I need to say it again? If you don't phrase your mind right, if you don't put your question down in a proper format, you will not get a distinct answer that answers the mail. FBA is nothing more than distortion, gamesmanship, and revisionism. Period. Let's keep going. Core criticism and concerns. Lineage gatekeeping. The focus on documented American slavery lineage creates rigid boundaries. It excludes immigrant and multi-ethnic Black populations because, as I said before, such as Marcus Garvey, you had Blacks who came from different countries, came from Haiti, came from Jamaica. Some who may have come from Brazil, South America, you name it. They came from different countries, but they were still African descendants because they were descendants of slaves in their respective, countries outside of Africa, just like Blacks are to America. Never forget that, folks. I said it before, I'll say it again, and I will continue to say that. It doesn't matter where the slave ships dropped us off. It matters where they took us from. What are we talking about this? Focus on documented slavery, creates rigid boundaries, excludes immigrant and multi-ethnic Black populations. Critics state this division weakens broader civil rights. Critics state this division weakens broader civil rights solidarity. And revisionist history claims. Opponents argue that the movement misinterprets complex historical timelines. Yes, it does. And I mentioned this earlier. When you hear Blacks talk about, well, we were here before the English slave traders or the settlers got here. We were always here. No, we were not. The only reason that Africans beat the English here before the English part of the transatlantic slave trade started is because the Spanish slave traders, all right, the Spanish brought us up from the Caribbean, from the South American or South regional slave colonies to America. The colony failed. The Blacks revolted. The Spanish said, we're not bringing them uppity ninjas back here with us, and left their Black asses here on American soil, to which again they more or less integrated in with the local Indian populace. That's why Black people were here before the English settlers got here. We did not come to this country as freemen, say, or not all was there. I'll take that back. You did have some Blacks who came under Spanish authority who were given their freedom or had been free, but there was not a large thing in mass of free Blacks. Understand this. We ideally and predominantly came in mass to this country as slaves. But FBA doesn't know that part of history because they're not really astute when it comes to that. Parallels to extremism. Critics note a heavy reliance on anti-immigrant and isolationist talking points. Exclusive focus on resources resembles ethno-nationalist protectionism. Aggressive online discourse mimics far-right digital tactics. And going back to revisionist history class, if I missed anything, let me read these two just in case I did. It sometimes minimizes shared global struggles against oppression. Historical nuances are compressed to fit a specific national narrative. All this is true. Tell me that no one here has seen anything or heard anything from FBA based on what I've just read here. All of that should be familiar. And what I'm putting down to everybody right now, you should recognize this if you give any thought to this rhetoric that you hear from FBA. What I am outlining right now is word for word damn near everything that they do. The modern socio-political movement, Foundation of Black Americans, falsely represents African Americans already acknowledged in history by fraudulent claims of fabricated and nationalist Black excellence via their divisive anti-Black diaspora rhetoric. So I got a good piece of information back from that exchange. The Foundation of Black American movement seeks to separate the lineage of U.S. chattel slavery from the broader African diaspora. Critics argue its rhetoric fosters division and mirrors anti-immigrant narratives, while proponents state it demands specific historical recognition and targeted policy acknowledgement. That's a bunch of yin yang, these guys. All they're looking to do is to say that nobody else but us deserves reparations. But again, FBA cannot claim reparations because you have to be an African American descendant or a descendant of African American slaves, a descendant of African slavery, which again, FBA has said they are not. There's no money for y'all. Lineage focus. Proponents define FBA as a distinct group tracing ancestry directly to enslaved people in the United States. You know what? This is pretty much on repeat now, but I guess everyone should understand what I'm saying. FBA has no culture, they have no history, they have no lineage, they have no icons. Be active, what you got? It's harder to add it to the algorithm when all social media is controlled by the division department. Someone is always trying to keep us separate. All right, folks, we're just about there. We've gone over an hour by 11 minutes, but you know what? This is still good information. And again, I'm glad that Be Active, you and Time showed up. I greatly appreciate it. Helps add to what's going on here. So here's something that you hear me riff on all the time about how FBA likes to just arbitrarily claim this person is FBA, this person is FBA, not taking the time to do their research and understand that if Malcolm X, if W.E. Du Bois, Thurgood Marshall, if Shirley Chisholm, if any of these folks were alive, they would not align with FBA ideology because they were either direct and staunch Pan-Africanists or look to uplift Blacks from the plight of oppression around the world. FBA does not think when they arbitrarily try and make someone or claim them to be FBA. Does FBA routinely misappropriate civil rights icons as being affiliated with FBA to legitimize their anti-Black rhetoric? Answer is, critics and political analysts widely argue that the foundational Black American movement utilizes historical figures and civil rights icons out of context to fit its nationalist and anti-immigrant narratives. Commentators note that while major civil rights and Black power leaders typically championing international solidarity and Pan-Africanism, the FBA framework often retroactively claims these figures to validate an isolationist ideology. What can I say, folks? Are you liking what I'm saying? Are you seeing what I'm saying? Are you recognizing that facts don't choose sides, but people do? There's nothing in this paragraph that you have not heard me say, if not tonight, on other instances and opportunities. The fact is the only true answer. Holla back. Critique of lineage claims. Global solidarity versus nativism. Scholars observe that figures like Malcolm X and Stokely Carmichael, who became Kwame Ture, evolved towards global anti-imperialism, yet their legacies are frequently invoked by FBA commentators to support arguments against the broader African diaspora, and that does not work. Hey, we're down with the facts, Be Active. As I said, you can't just arbitrarily go out and grab someone and say that, well, I like the fact that Malcolm X talked about self-determination and self-reliance. You know what? That's a good quality for FBA. That's why he's foundational. And it all blows up if someone just takes the time to look thoroughly at the fact that is not hidden and not unknown by people who are cognizant of facts. Malcolm X was a staunch Pan-Africanist. But still, they make the mistake of trying to claim him. I forgot what my man said. Lord, 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 Lord. People. Revisionist history. Analysts point out that framing historical Black activism strictly through a localized modern FBA lens glosses over the multi-ethnic and internationalist coalitions that define the actual civil rights movement. Speak on it. Ideological instrumentalism. Critics characterize the use of historical icons as an attempt to grant traditional or mainstream moral authority to rhetoric that targets non-native Black immigrants. And that's exactly what they do. You know what? Let me go ahead and give this a slow scroll. Maybe I'm gonna give it a golf clap also. Bask in it, FBA, if you happen to be watching. And if you're not watching, someone take this to your FBA hangouts. The next time you roll through one of these FBA spots, go ahead and put them on to us, man. Let them see this. All right, so one thing that I have not done, what I need to do is let people know what's going on over here. Find somebody who knows somebody to tell somebody about what we've got going on over here. If you like it, let us know. Share it if you do, and subscribe if this is what you're looking for. And again, this is a value conversation, Gen X spoken word. Let somebody know about us. All right, so we're coming down to the last two tags here. So let's go ahead and get it in. FBA claiming indigenous status by virtue of proximity during the founding of America is a disingenuous attempt at manufacturing heritage, lineage, and a false identity that the scientific community recognizes as intentionally misleading and fraudulent. So what I'm talking about is this thing that FBAs, depending on the ones you talk to, think they're more clever than the average idiot, who like to say that, oh, well, we are indigenous to America because when America was founded, we were here. No, that does not make you indigenous just because Africans were here breathing air. But again, this is that gamesmanship. All right, this is that wordsmithing. This is the semantics that I'm talking about. This is the deception that FBA likes to rely on. Hey, I told you, Time. You gotta understand something, man. I am no believer in any God whatsoever. So that is one thing that I've made clear and that I will not back down on because somebody else's delusion is not my reality. But we have a show coming up on that. But understand something, man. No, there has never been a God in existence. But what has been in existence is the Roman Catholic Church in 1455 under the guise of Pope Nicholas V, sanctioning slavery for Africans. Matter of fact, for anyone who did not believe in the fictional God Jesus Christ, therefore, which is used as justification to call Blacks or anyone else who is non-white savages and animals, also feeding into the inferior mental capabilities. All that goes back to the Roman Catholic Church. But we'll do a show on that, man, just to make sure if you haven't heard that, you do now, or you do know now. And that we call in the streets, yep, culture vultures. Don't put FBA on me, man. I just try to support Black people, and apparently they don't want to be Black. I met that one that said he's Black. I don't know who to believe. All this stuff is new to me. Yes, I understand it's new, but again, what's also going to be new are some of the other lies that I start going in on. And again, Christianity is a part of that lie. It is amazing to me, and Be Active knows this as well as I do, of how Blacks are always talking about, oh, Lord Jesus, come save me, not realizing that Jesus Christ or the fictional individual was never here to bring you salvation. The fictional character was intended to prevent you from achieving liberation. As I said in the previous show, the clergy was a big benefactor of slavery. They ran slave plantations also. They traded slaves just like everybody else, but That is something that is not known by a lot of people because it's not spoken of. But I speak of it. And I tell people all the time, you're going to think of Jesus as being anything. He was not a shepherd. Think of him as being a CEO, a captor, an enslaver, and an overseer. Well, we're going to get into that now. I think I've put that show off long enough. The next couple of shows, we're going to actually take a look at what Christianity has been to blacks. And that is the last relic of slavery that still exists. Now, getting back to this. Did I see this? Let me read this one more time here because I sometimes get off on a tangent. Yes, Christianity was what ruler of slavery and colonization. A lot of people don't know this, but damn it, you are going to once I get through breaking down the facts for you. Claims by some substance within the foundation of Black American movement that they are the true or exclusive indigenous people of the Americas rather than descendants of the transatlantic slave trade with African ancestry are rejected by mainstream historians, geneticists, and anthropologists as pseudo-historical narratives. While the core FBA designation generally denotes lineage from enslaved people in the United States, fringe elements promoting pre-Columbian autonomous, or I'm not even going to try and pronounce that again, indigenous status are viewed by the scientific and tribal communities as purveyors of misinformation. So nothing pisses me off more than when I go to a Black content creators platform and I see them allow misinformation to be, as they say, well, let's hash this out. Let's mine this out. Well, let's dig deeper into this. No, you don't dig into disinformation. All you're doing is giving it legs to continue to walk around and then procreate with somebody else's ignorance and making it more of an issue that I and others have to contend with. So no, folks, we don't give any air to disinformation. The minute I hear it, it's done, and the person speaking it gets a warning. I don't do disinformation. Keep that in mind, folks. Scientific and historical consensus. Genetic data. Comprehensive genetic and anthropological studies show that African Americans possess predominantly West and Central African ancestry, alongside varying degrees of European and, in some cases, documented minor Native American admixture. But they do not possess an autochthonous, that's what I want to call it, autochthonous pre-Columbian American genetic lineage. Lineage realities. Mainstream scholars emphasize that acknowledging survival through American chattel slavery does not require or involve erasing historical ties to the African continent, but that's what you get from FBA. Again, they claim that we don't have any affiliation with Africans because we've always been here. We're indigenous to North America. No, you're not. You're not indigenous to North America, nor are you indigenous to the United States of America. So this is where they try and play that the dozens again. All right, they try and get all brand new. Well, we didn't say that we were indigenous to the North America. We said that we were indigenous to the United States. None of that works. None of that. As I said before, when you talk lineage, in order to claim lineage, you have to have a direct and continuous connection to an origin that FBA does not have, because of the fact by claiming that they are not affiliated with Africa, they are not from Africa, they are indigenous to America. Well, wait a minute. The whole purpose of reparations is that it is for descendants of African American slavery, or should I say enslaved Africans. FBA does not qualify. Oh, and time through back. Christianity has ruled the Western Hemisphere for about the past 2,000 years. This secular government we're about to lose has given us a small reprieve. And Tom, I'm not sure what you mean by a reprieve, because if you've been paying attention, what you're seeing from this government is everything that Christianity, which was a violent religious sect to begin with, they're all about it. Matter of fact, I want everyone to take the time to look up the Seven Mountains Mandate. I think I mentioned that before. Everything that we're seeing being enacted in this government right now is based upon Project 2025, taking information directly from the Seven Mountains Mandate and making it a government mandate. So, Time, I need you to go ahead and keep paying attention, man, because you're off base on this. Now, you say that you don't know enough about it, you're not sure, but I get that. So, allow me to fill you with the correct information. There's no reprieve going on right now. What we are in right now is the full swing of Christian nationalism that has been the, should I say, the undertone, the purveyor of far right extremism, white supremacy, anything that we've seen here in America. Christian nationalism has been at the root of it. And it is now coming out, and these folks have gotten damn comfortable about displaying it because they believe that it's pretty much a wrap because we have elements like FBA preventing us, not just, we'll say, not just African descendants, but preventing people, whether they be white, whether they be Hispanic or whatnot, from voting because of being caught in with this nonsense that we see coming from FBA or just coming from the biggest themselves who are in charge of the company. Keep watching. All right, so getting back on track, where were we? Lineage realities. Mainstream scholars emphasize that acknowledging survival through American chattel slavery does not require involve erasing historical ties to the African continent. We read that. Tribal sovereignty. Anthropologists and indigenous nations stress that indigenous identity is a political, cultural, and relationship tied to a specific tribal sovereign nations rather than a self-declared racial category or proximity claim. Now, this was something I've heard some guy talking about the other day. Then, of course, FBA saying that, oh, no, I don't have to prove any of this stuff. We were here first. Okay, what says that we were here first? And the person that said, show me some type of tribal lineage. Show me some type of DNA test. Show me something from the government that shows that you have registered. The guy couldn't produce any of that, but he kept saying that the actual indigenous people were not from here. Oh, you guys are Siberian Huskies. So, no, what do you mean? And then the name calling. How are you going to renounce your heritage, but then try to claim someone else's? Holler back at me, folks, if you see the foolery in this that I do. Now, something that Cassandra corrected me on when she was on the show last week, she mentioned that I want to say, was it Montana, but somewhere in the States, there was evidence that was found that verified the claims that instead of everyone believing that the Native Americans crossed over from Siberia and crossed into America, they were literally already here. So that has changed the rhetoric that America was not inhabited by anyone. The Native Americans were already here. And we're talking about, again, completely blowing up the whole concept of they came from Siberia, crossed over the Bering Straits, and came down to America. There was proof that was found stating that Native Americans were in the country from the very beginning. What do we got? Slavery and colonization of the Americas. No matter if it was Spaniards, Portuguese, French, English, British, Dutch, they all were ruled by Christianity. Yep. And because of that, Christianity said that go forth and spread the message. So therefore, when you hear about the savage beatings, the mistreatment of anyone who was enslaved, it's because it was believed that, well, this is what you deserve. This is what you earned. This is what you get because of the fact that you are savages. You are unkept. You are unclean. And the word of fictional Jesus Christ and our Lord God and all this other nonsense gives me the authority to do so because of the fact that, again, in 1455, Pope Nicholas V sanctioned slavery for those who do not believe in the fictional character Jesus Christ, starting with Africa. The Christian ideologies were what tried to erase all indigenous and African languages, culture, traditions in the Americas. Damn it, yes. Yes, yes, yes. The most effective way to take away a person's knowledge of self is to destroy the memory of who they were. And that's precisely what happened with slavery. Once we were brought here in mass to the United States, to the Caribbean, to South America, whatnot, the whole thing of bringing out Christianity was to make us like them, because the thought process was, if we can get them to think like us and be like us, it will be it will be easier to control them. There was a book, How to Make a Negro Christian, or the making of a. You know what? Hold tight for a second, folks. Let me stop blabbing. Let me go ahead and see if I can find the book. Give me a second. Whew. Y'all, I lied again. I said this was going to be a short show. Now, I took myself into that lie. But anyway, the book, How to Make a Negro Christian. So the whole thing here was that in order for us to get what we want out of these black savages, we've got to get them to think like us. We got to get them to be like us. We've got to get them to worship like us. As I tell folks all the time, Christianity did not come across us because it was freely, it was something freely that we wanted to have a part of. No, it was brought upon us through repression, deceit, violence, to which we can talk about violence being enacted through the sharp tongue of a bullwhip. That's how Christianity came to be known by Africans in large quantities, in mass. Secular government hasn't been perfect, but it gave us history's greatest advancements. Now, rising religious nationalism, polarization are setting us up to lose it all. Yes, I will say that is the case. If I misunderstood you, my bad. If you're talking about the break, yes, the break was probably the 4 years we have the last administration getting away from this religious treachery that we see coming in through Christian nationalism. We go back to 6th January, where you have shirts and banners saying, Trump is my president, but Jesus is my Lord, this type of nonsense. All that had a beginning and began with the falsehoods of Christianity. Let's get back to it now. Motivations and discourse. Delineation versus indigeneity. Most discussions regarding the FBA label focus on political and economic delineation. And when they say delineation, they're speaking of it properly, which is to specify. Delineation does not mean separate, which is how FBA misuses the word delineate. I think Beat Active and I threw out some terms about that regarding how FBA has a tendency to misutilize the words they like to believe strengthens their cause. So going back to this, most discussions regarding the FBA label focus on political and economic delineation, such as prioritizing specific lineage for U.S. reparations rather than fringe indigenous claims. Critics and commenters point out that adopting pseudo-historical narratives to claim native status undermines actual indigenous struggles against ethnic fraud, pretendianism, and fosters unnecessary division within the broader African diaspora. All of which you've heard me say either tonight or in other instances. Get with it, people. FBA is going to drag us into a hole much further than we already are in if you do not arm yourselves with facts. FBA is not indigenous to North America. FBA has no history, no culture, no lineage, no icons. They steal credibility because they have not gained or proven any way of establishing credibility. They are culture vultures of their own culture. As I said before, stolen valor. The history of slavery of the New World, aka Americas, was all controlled by Christianity and European prisoners who they got offered a second chance of freedom. Yep, they had people that came over to the colonies in Spain and even to America, excuse me, to allow them to have the opportunity to make right. But notice they got them out of the countries. They got rid of them, kicked them out under what we'll say it was a nice form of immigration with an E-M-M-I-G-R-A-T-I-O-N, to give them the opportunity to start anew. But be that as it may, everywhere that the European settlers went, whether from starting from England, from Germany, from France, you name it, every place that the explorers went, no one can sit here and say that slavery and oppression did not follow them. There was never an indigenous culture that came in contact with European explorers who weren't subjugated eventually into enslavement, put into enslavement upon meeting and consorting with the European explorers. If they took part in America's colonization, let me go back and do this over. The history of slavery in the New World, aka Americas, was all controlled by Christianity and Europeans prisoners who they got offered a second chance of freedom if they took part in America's colonization. Yes, 100%. All right, so we run that one out. And last but not least, so going back to what Sandra was talking about when I mentioned that FBA claimed that, we are too indigenous, but yet they have no paperwork. Well, all that stuff you talk about, we don't need that. That's not true. They don't do this. Define the process of being recognized as an indigenous American. So as I said here, the guy that I'm speaking of, everything that I'm about to read to you, he said, no, nobody does that. You don't have to do that to be indigenous. My people were from here. You people are Siberian Huskies. Get out of here. Again, how are you going to forsake your heritage, but then turn around and try to claim someone else's? Time. Right. Christianity was over the slave trade since inception, and secular governance didn't bring it an end, but it fostered the environment where it could be ended 150 years after it started. Well, actually, if you didn't know, time, up until 1960, there were blacks who did not know that slavery had actually ended in America. But of course, it was in the South. I need to go back and find this information here. But there are records of people who were still working in slave conditions because the people who owned the land, aka the white bigoted supremacists who owned the land, did not tell them that slavery had ended. More to go on that one later. But anyway, getting back to this final piece here. Being recognized as an indigenous American involves a legal and cultural process. It requires official tribal enrollment, proof of lineage, and meeting specific blood quantum or community ties required by a sovereign Native American tribe. And these are all facts. This FBA acolyte thumbed his nose at everything that was just said in that paragraph or what I'm about to read. Literally without anything sustaining his argument, he just said, none of that stuff matters. None of that matters. I'm indigenous to this land. My people were here first. But couldn't produce anything, couldn't give any example other than his word, which does not amount to a damn thing. Legal and tribal recognition. Tribal enrollment. You must apply directly to a federally or state recognized tribe. Blood quantum. Many tribes require a minimum percentage of Native American blood, known as blood quantum. Lineage proof. You must provide birth certificates, family trees, and historical records like the Dawes rules. Sovereignty. Each tribe sets its own rules for citizenship. United States federal government does not decide who is a member. Federal recognition. The Bureau of Indian Affairs. Groups seeking official federal status must petition the Bureau of Indian Affairs through the Office of Federal Acknowledgement. And historical proof. This is the big thing. A petition requires extensive proof of continuous historical community, political authority, and distinct culture, none of which FBA can claim. All they do is say, my grandmama said, and here they go, putting feathers on their head, paint on their face, making moccasins without actually knowing how, unless they go into the internet and find a way to make moccasins, and then turn around and sell that mess, claiming that I am indigenous American and this is product of my culture. Hope your asses get locked up. Woo. All right, folks. So I am over my time, but you know what? Good information sometimes needs to be gotten out there. So if there's any questions that anyone has, please understand that I dropped my email address earlier, 1970johnhenry@gmail.com. Ask me questions. Give me ideas. But the most important thing I want everyone to understand is that I can't do anything unless everybody knows what I'm doing here. I can't be influential. I can't help to dispel any of this nonsense that FBA is putting out if no one talks about the show and puts the information out and make sure others know about it. All right? Let's get up here big time. So, time, be active, fellas. As always, thank you guys for showing up. Again, I apologize. This was a completely random moment that's gone further than I expected, but information gets out and it has a way of extending the show. But still, I thank you guys for showing up. As always, much appreciated. So, what's the takeaway from this? As I said before, as I said previously, as I'll continue saying, and I'll say it again now, FBA has no culture, no lineage, no history, no icons, unless they self-tether themselves to the backs of African Americans with distinction, who are actually responsible for the foundation that Black prominence sits on in America. Find somebody who knows somebody to tell somebody about what we've got going on over here. If you like it, let us know. Share it if you do. And subscribe. This is what you're looking for. Last but not least, but the thing is, when it came to the Anglo-Saxons, like British Dutch, the first one was those who wanted to start new form racist Christianity, like the Mormons, for example. What else have we got? John, no doubt, my brother. I appreciate that, as always. All right, folks. I'll catch you some other time. Peace out. See you.